to be Marty McFly at some point, you know.
Yes.
In the spring of 2018, I moved to Nicaragua. If you're not familiar, Nicaragua is a country in Central America, about the size of the state of New York. I was to live in Granada, which is a city that is just gorgeous. It's bordering a lake, and all the buildings are painted these vivid colors with terracotta roofs. In the center of town, there's this huge, beautiful Catholic church that you can see from every point in the city. I was in love with it. I arrived at the age of 26 to take on my first job as a yoga instructor. Very exciting. I had lived a life that was very sheltered up until that point. I had been an overly studious perfectionist with an eating disorder that caused me to isolate myself for many years. I was still a virgin, and I had never had a real connection with anyone through my whole life. I was ready for a change. I thought that taking on this new role and moving to this new place would open up some doors and allow me to make connections and let myself be seen. And I don't mean to spoil the story by telling you, but none of that shit happened. It started off great. Still holding down that laugh, I love it. It started off so great. As soon as I arrived, all my neighbors, co-workers, all these beautiful Nicaraguans welcomed me with open arms. We were bonding so well. I had studied Spanish at UGA, so I was able to connect with them in a way that a lot of gringos weren't able to. And it felt really good. It felt good to finally have connections. We were hanging out every day, playing soccer, going to this park by the lake, throwing the frisbee around. And the owner of the yoga studio trusted me with this new puppy that he had gotten. I was so excited about this puppy, whose name was Manea, which in Spanish means wiggle. Me and Manea were like two peas in a pod. We were hanging out all the time. I was taking her on long walks. And everyone just saw me with Manea all the time. I was a lot like Manea. Hopeful, kind of blossoming together, and wiggling around. One night, I was walking home with Manea, and I saw these two guys on a corner. They were struggling to carry a refrigerator. And so I asked them if they wanted help, and they kind of reluctantly said, okay. And so I get one shoulder and arm under this refrigerator, with my other hand holding Manea's leash, and I'm walking with these guys. And then I realized that these guys have bandanas over their faces. And then I realized that there are a lot more guys with similar face bandana situations carrying expensive appliances down the street. And then I noticed that people are coming out of their houses to film us as we drop this refrigerator off at this really sketchy house. And over the coming days, many people about town would recognize me and Manea from these videos. And they thought it was hilarious, because it was. You can picture these videos that contained multitudes, just waves of anonymous Nicaraguans looting alongside a completely oblivious and bandana-less gringo and puppy. it turns out this looting was the first beginnings of increasingly violent protests against Nicaragua's dictator, Daniel Ortega, that would be responded to with increasingly authoritarian responses from the government. So over the coming months, every single night, there was lootings, buildings being burned down, and explosives going off all through the night, often until 4 a.m. And people began to be fearful and despondent. And I was no longer able to see my new friends because we went into lockdown. And I was no longer able to fall asleep at night. The thing about Nicaragua is you can purchase a lot of drugs over the counter that you can't purchase here without a prescription, like Valium. And I really liked Valium. I liked it a lot. It did exactly what I needed it to do. It quelled the anxiety that I had, and it helped me to fall asleep. And that worked for a little while. The lockdown got more and more intense, and I was more or less sequestered with just one man who was the groundskeeper of the building I lived in. And this man stayed glued to the TV day and night, watching the news, and all he had to contribute to our conversations was saying things like, "Estamos jodidos," which means, we're fucked. And I did not cope well with the situation. I fell back into my habits of having an eating disorder. I really wanted to get some reprieve, but I couldn't find it. And I would stay up late hours and increasingly take more Valium, trying to find rest. People were dying and losing their jobs, and I started to numb myself. I had to detach from what was happening around me. And over time, I just increased how much Valium I was taking every night. First it was 2 pills, then it was 4, then it was 8. And one night, after 3 nights of not getting a wink of sleep, I reached my wit's end. I had taken my normal dose of 8 pills, and I still couldn't fall asleep, so I took 10 more. It was 4 a.m., and I still couldn't find sleep, so I wrote a note. And I walked out to the lake and filled my backpack with heavy rocks, and I walked into the lake. And I don't remember it very well, but I do remember reaching the point where water was above my head and my feet were off of the lake floor. And I remember thinking about my parents. And I remember feeling regret. And about 30 seconds after I was suspended, a light shines out, a bright orange light coming from underneath me. And I guess my phone had gone into some kind of mode responding to water damage, shining this bright orange light, and it woke me up. And it reminded me of the hope I felt when I arrived. And I knew that the only way that I could find what I hoped for was to turn around. Thank you.